Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when this finds you. Just want to talk briefly about something that I think is important, and that's about having a vision. In the book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 2, it says to write down our vision and make it plain. We have to start encouraging our future toward long-term visions instead of short-term gains. What does that mean? It means in our culture we have a tendency to steer our young men in the direction of sports more than education. There's nothing wrong with earning a living that way, but we must understand that unless your child is a superstar, his career will last about 4 years provided he makes it to the professional ranks. What is he going to do after those days are over with if we've not encouraged him to plan for the future? Because the future is a much longer time than the life of a sports career. We don't see men past age 45 playing sports in any field except golf. I think old Brady is knocking on the door, but for the most part, that environment's not going to be long term. I just read an article here recently. A young lady was talking about playing in the WNBA. Then she was talking about the culture of that whole situation where she's not like 98% of the women in that league, and because of that she's been basically ostracized. But in order for us to help our youth have long-term vision, we must do a better job at programming them in the early years of life, because the programming we're given now is just not working. I heard a guy say that the programming for life happens between birth, while you're still in the womb, and age 7. And since that's the case, and this doctor has studied this stuff extensively, and with that being the case, we need to be careful of what we're teaching our children by our words and our actions. If we teach them poverty, guess what their thought process will look like when they start to work? What if we started to teach them early on that they're worthy and greatness lies within them? We can teach them before they even leave the womb by daily repetition. And I think Napoleon Hill calls it in his book Think and Grow Rich, auto-suggestion. And by repetition or auto-suggestion, we can reinforce it in those early years. Can you imagine the thought process your child would have if you put positive into their subconscious mind early on before they ever started to read? In order for us to do this, we have to start to change our programming as the adults, as the leaders. You cannot pull out of your mind what you haven't put into it. Now, if curses are passed down through generations, just think what would happen if success principles and thoughts started to pass down. And I've had some discussions with people say there's no such thing as generational curses, they're generational habits. Well, if it's a habit, that means the curse hasn't been broken. And just my opinion. But in all my study of generational curses, that devil hasn't been dealt with. That demon hasn't been dealt with. So it's still a curse. That's why it became a habit, because it's still a curse. Now, we have to have a vision ourselves, because our offspring are supposed to build on what we've already built. They're not supposed to be starting from scratch. They should be able to stand on our shoulders and see much further than we ever could. But if they're standing right next to us at zero, they can only see the same things that we see. More of our kids are needed in the fields of medicine, engineering, and the sciences. We need our youth to understand ownership. We need our youth to understand the stock market and entrepreneurship. We must teach our youth what it means to acquire and maintain assets. Sure, the big payouts are nice, but after that, what do you own? In the year 2018, I spent a month in the hospital when the days counted and added up. One of the things that troubled me was the absence of black doctors and nurses. You've heard me mention before that there less than 5 or 6% of American doctors are black. I think the figure might say around 4.8% or something like that. And during that visit, I had 2 nurses who were black Americans and not one doctor who was black. And when you take into account my last day, I had a total of 13 doctors that I can think of off the top of my head. It might have been a few more. 13 doctors, not one black one, not one American black. Now, other nurses were white, but the great majority of them were from other countries around the world. Now, ironically, most of my PCAs, or what we call patient care assistants, were black Americans. And by no means am I putting those professions down, because they are making honest livings, and some of them do very well. The point I'm making is we've taken the easy road when it comes to higher learning and career objectives. And I know historically that, about a century ago, maybe even half a century ago, most of our educators are being people blacks who got educated were steered toward the teaching profession only. But you really can't say that when you start actually understanding and looking at some of the history and the professions of some of our other blacks as well. But I know there was a point where teaching was really the only profession they were trying to steer blacks into. And when you figured out that they were trying to control the school system, you'd understand why they wanted black people to take those positions as well, to educate the black students. But we have to start with our higher learning. And I'm not saying all higher learning, because there are a lot of people that do well without higher education. Some people didn't even attend college. Some people didn't even finish high school, and they do well. Education is not the end all. I'm just making a point, because when we take the time to get the education, we can position ourselves for longer term success in fields that are in demand. And education doesn't always come in the form of a school. Education also comes in the form of on-the-job training, experience, and things like that. So when I say education, I'm talking about education. I'm not talking about schooling. They're not the same things. And so it cannot be stressed enough that we need visionaries in our culture, in our race, in our ethnicity. We need entrepreneurs in our race. And we need economic autonomy as a people. Without any economic empowerment, we are a powerless people. That $1.1 trillion that goes through our hands every year has given us zero power, because we're giving it all away to other people. We must stop depending on black politicians. We must stop depending on black preachers to stand in the gap for us. Many times they slow the progress of the race because they have a simple-minded thought process. And a lot of them have a drive for selfish and personal gains at the expense of the race. We don't need black leaders to act on our behalf. We need black men to stand up and take their homes back and paint the vision for the future. And I'm going to close out with something I read from a guy named Neville Goddard. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he was one of the early success motivational type people, or whatever you want to call them. But Neville Goddard said this: "You are already that which you want to be, and your refusal to believe it is the only reason you do not see it." Have a great day.